What's up, brother? Special teams, special plays, special show for you today on Check Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. If you're watching right now at the usual time, you're saying, wait a second, doesn't have that typical live icon, JD. What's going on with this show? It's probably because, or no, it's actually definitely because we are currently in Knoxville, Tennessee, talking to Coach Heupel, checking out the spring practice going on behind closed doors over there, probably watching Nico spin the pill like a shady pharmacist. We're still glad to have you tuned in, though, okay? This is still going to be the same format as every other live show that we do on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. So, with that being said, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, but also make sure you're following me on the social channels at JD Pickel, Twitter, Instagram. I'm going to be posting stuff there in real time to kind of give you as much access as we possibly can to our travels. We're also going to pop up somewhere Wednesday that will be a live show, okay? So be dialed into the socials to make sure you know where we're headed. We got a lot to jump into, baby. It's April and college football is still the greatest sport on the planet. We got the teams that need to have a little bit more respect put on their name. There's a lot of buzz around some of these big names in the sport and big teams in the sport, and for good reason. We've contributed to that as well. But who are the teams that maybe deserve a little bit more attention? We'll talk about that. Also, Auburn, they had their A-Day this past weekend. Now, we got a absolutely massive weekend of spring games on the docket coming up this Saturday. But with the A-Day that Auburn just had, we saw Cam Coleman go berserk. I think Peyton Thorne looked really comfortable. But let's take a step back and take a macro look at where Auburn is right now and how we think they're going to fare when it comes to the 2024 season. Definitive statements aplenty when it comes to that segment. Also, who are the most dangerous defenses in college football? Now, we tried to do this segment for you on our Thursday live show. Technology said no, Dikembe Mutombo style. Nonetheless, we press on and bring that segment back for you this show. Also, April, as I mentioned a second ago, not necessarily the hottest month when it comes to the college football calendar. But even with that being said, college football is still awesome in April, and we'll tell you why. Glad to have you here. I'll say it one more time. Make sure you are subscribed. We are charging towards 200,000 subscriptions. That's all y'all. We appreciate you adding to this college football community, and we appreciate y'all being a part of it. Not something we take for granted in the slightest, and not something we are going to ever take for granted anytime soon. So, with that being said, let's jump right into this segment, man. Who would that's not really a word, is it? Let's start that again. There are a lot of narratives in the college football world right now. Now, narratives have a negative connotation to them just by the nature of that word, but I think there's a lot of narratives right now in the college football landscape that we need to be careful of. A lot of tomfoolery going on right now in the college football world. So some narratives that I think we need to be cautious of together as a college football community. Let's dive into a couple of those right now. The first narrative that is floating around out there and has a lot of traction is that Florida is just dead in the water. A lot of folks saying Billy Napier is going to be fired before the season's even over. A lot of people saying that Florida is just no good to begin with. Knock it down to the studs, blow it all up, Florida's dead in the water. And while I see where you're coming from, because Florida, let's be real here, they underperformed based on their own expectations in Gainesville last year. Florida, I believe, has a lot more under the hood than most people would like to believe. And I think also context for Florida is massive. I'll reset the table for you one more time. Florida, first year for Billy Napier. They go 6-7. Say, okay, good, not great. It's year one. Let's see where they go in year two. Year two, the over-under win total comes out in Vegas. 5.5 was the number. So we're saying, okay, expectations aren't sky high for the Gators, but it is what it is. So we sat here on this show this time last year and said, for Florida, I would need to see progress to count year two as a success. Okay, so the number I was looking for was 7 wins. Now, Florida, just so we're on the same page here, 2 plays away from 7 wins. If you stop that 4th and a mile against Missouri, that's a win. You kick the field goal against Arkansas, that's a win. I understand. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. It is what it is. You can't go back and change the past. So they went 5-7. But again, I think when you look at what they are in year 3, you have a second-year quarterback in the system in Graham Mertz, who's going on his 19th year playing college football. Crazy but true. They have tightened the screws on that wide receiver room. Went and got one of his go-to guys from Wisconsin. You got Eugene Wilson coming into his own, I believe, in this offense. His true sophomore year in Gainesville. Secondary's a lot better than it was a year ago. They were banged up there last year. Had to play a lot of young bucks. They feel much better about that unit. They feel better about the defense overall. You gave Austin Armstrong, who was a young defensive coordinator, a little bit more of support with Ron Roberts joining into that staff over there as well. The bottom line here is Florida is not nearly as far gone as some folks would lead you to believe. I'm not telling you they're winning the SEC. I'm not telling you they're going to win double-digit ball games. But to assume that Florida is just going to be an easy dub whenever you stroll into the swamp, my friend, we are not necessarily on the same page, or we're not aligned in our train of thought. The big thing for Florida, the thing that I'm watching most closely here, do they have a year 3 culture internally? Do they act like a year 3 team when it comes to procedures, when it comes to execution, when it comes to being able to consistently be the same team week in and week out, regardless of big win, close loss, whatever it is? Do they continue to answer the call to action? Okay, that's going to be the difference maker for me with Florida in year 3 under Billy Napier. So not dead in the water. That narrative, I believe, is a little bit dangerous, a little bit sketchy to buy into. Another narrative here that we got to make sure we have our head on a swivel with, something you're going to hear a lot this offseason. Alabama is going to fall off in 2024. Now, this narrative is probably something that you'll hear from other folks in the SEC, and that's fine. I mean, more power to you. I would speak negatively against my rival as well, or the team that pretty much run the conference for the better part of the last 17 years. It is what it is. New head coach in Kalen DeBoer. There is no way to overestimate the impact Nick Saban had on Alabama. He made Alabama what they were for the last nearly 2 decades. But there's a lot of folks that have reservations about Kalen DeBoer and long-term his success at Alabama. And I think we're going to, get to see what he is long-term, hopefully. But when you talk about Alabama and the reasons why you don't think Kalen DeBoer will succeed long-term, it usually is tied to something with him as a recruiter. Say, I can't recruit in the SEC. This is a different pace for him. Like a lot of things that probably lined up with that train of thought. Say what you want about Kalen DeBoer as a recruiter. Dude can coach some football now. All right, 104-12 as a head coach. And in year 1, you're not going to learn about Kalen DeBoer as a recruiter, because Kalen DeBoer is, for the most part, utilizing the ingredients that Nick Saban left for him. Okay, and that's not to speak ill of Kalen DeBoer. It's just saying the cupboard is pretty stocked. Now the transfer portal does what the transfer portal does, and they have about 33% of that production on defense returning from last year. But everybody that's on this roster that committed out of high school to Alabama was a part of a top 3 class. Now, unproven production means a lot of different things in different places. What it means at Alabama is you're probably a 4 or 5 star that just hasn't really seen the field yet. Okay, so say what you want about Alabama. Say what you want about Kalen DeBoer long term. I'm not expecting a major fall off in 2024. Now, are they going to win the SEC? We're going to find out, but I think they'll have the talent roster and they'll have the staff in place to be in every single ball game they play. That's how I feel about it. Will that happen? Remains to be seen, but I'd be slow to assume Alabama's going to have some sort of massive fall off. Another narrative we're going to hear here. Peyton Thorne can't get it done. Peyton Thorne had a underwhelming first year in Auburn. There's no way around that, but the context with him, I think, is everything. It's everything. Like, say what you want about how he underperformed. The dude did not have the weapons he needed to be successful. He missed all of the most important practice period during a college football calendar year, which is, of course, spring practice. So he was kind of trying to get acclimated on the fly. And, oh, by the way, I think the system last year, by nature of the lack of result they had, probably wasn't as favorable as you would need if you're Peyton Thorne. So I say all that to say Hugh Freeze now more or less running the offense. You got a freak show wide receiver in Cam Coleman who's going to be out there for you as a true freshman. We saw what he could do in the A-Day. And I think when you talk about Peyton Thorne, there's one thought exercise I would encourage us to have together. How do you view Peyton Thorne if 4th and 31 against Alabama is incomplete? I think you would view him very differently than you do right now, because instead of Peyton Thorne being the guy who, didn't have all the success you wanted him to have his first year, and then changing that label to Peyton Thorne, the quarterback who took down Alabama, Nick Saban's last year in Tuscaloosa, he wasn't on the field for that. He wasn't playing safety back there when Jalen Milroe launched that missile to Isaiah Bond. Like, it is what it is. So all I'm trying to say here is the thought that Peyton Thorne is the governor for Auburn's success in 2024. He'll be a massive part of it either way, but this idea that he just doesn't have the juice to get it done, I'd be slow to assume that. He did have a pretty good career at Michigan State, just so we're on the same page. We've seen him play a high level of football. Let's go to the Big Ten for our last narrative we got to guard against here together as a college football community. A lot of folks saying Ryan Day is no good, right? A lot of people saying Ryan Day is what's holding Ohio State back, and they're very quick to point to the Michigan games and the way that they were pretty much bullied 2 of the last 3 years. The thing with me with Ryan Day is at every single turn, at every single down data point for Ohio State, he has been willing and quick to evolve. We talk about the game against Oregon where Oregon came into the shoe, ran for pretty much, I don't even know how many 100 yards it was. Ryan Day very quickly says, we got to be better defensively. That offseason goes and hires Jim Knowles. Now, this last season, Ohio State was a defensive-led football team. Had the ball with a chance to go and beat Michigan on that final drive. They don't get it done. In large part, you look at the quarterback play last year not being good enough to elevate Ohio State and maximize the skill they had. Ryan Day doesn't say, okay, let's go back another year, let's have another offseason and try and will ourselves over that hump. He says, we got to get better at quarterback. Go to the portal, land Will Howard. I think they're going to be better offensively this year. So when I look at Ryan Day and Ohio State, the reason why I don't buy the whole, well, he's not going to be able to get it done. One is just like we've seen that's not true. If that field goal goes in against Georgia in the college football playoff game a couple of years ago, he's got a national title to his name. So, again, woulda, shoulda, coulda, but I think that's a point in itself to be had there. The other thing is, like, Ohio State's won a lot of ball games under Ryan Day. Like, Ryan Day, I think, has got an 87% win percentage in Columbus. Y'all, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. So, when we talk about Ryan Day and being born on third base and all those jokes, like, I don't understand how you can be born on third base and have the roster that Ohio State has. Like, has the brand helped Ryan Day recruit the guys that he's got on campus right now? Of course. But you still have to put them in position to be successful. Ryan Day had a team that went 11-1 last year. And then he's pushed the envelope in every single sense this offseason to get better and get over the hump, beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win a national title. So I would actually argue that Ryan Day is a large part of the success that Ohio State's had since he's been there. The brand helps. There's no way around it. But his willingness to evolve, I think, is half the battle. And being willing to evolve and continuing to evolve means they're going to keep improving. And if you improve from 11-1, I think we can all kind of do the math on where that thing's headed. So a lot of narratives out there, a lot of things to be on guard against. But even so, we'll do it together. We'll link arms. We'll stick through these college football lies and the trenches that they bring against us together, and we'll swat those down one by one. So let me know what y'all think about those. Let me know the ones that you are hearing more of as well. Kind of the truth serum is what we're trying to provide here on this show. Hey, if you're watching this show on YouTube, we're very glad to have you here. I would also add, though, if you're listening on podcast, thank you. Thank you for listening on podcast. And if you aren't able to make the show live, not a problem at all. Podcast, a great place for you to consume this show. You can get it on Apple, you can get it on Spotify. No judgment, however you consume it. Rate it, review it, comment, and we'll keep a good thing going. Speaking of good things, man, there's a lot of good things in college football that I don't think are getting enough attention. Like, this is the part of the year where headline culture kind of starts to get some momentum, and we've taken part of that as well. Okay, make no mistake, we've been very adamant. We think Georgia's one of the best teams in the country. We think Ohio State, one of the best teams in the country. But at the exact same time, there's a couple of really good teams that I think deserve a lot more buzz. So who are some of those teams that are flying under the radar that deserve some more credit? Well, we'll talk about it right now. I think LSU is a massively slept-on team to this point in the year. And slept-on is maybe even the wrong word, but like you look at the SEC, and there's just so many major headlines that are sort of causing LSU to fly under that radar. Like as I said, Georgia, they're a monster. They are the favorite to win the national title for a reason. Alabama, new era out there. Kalen DeBoer played for a national title last year. What are they going to be this year? Texas, they entered the conference as a college football playoff team. What are they going to be? And then you got Brian Kelly just chilling there, probably at on his jet ski in Baton Rouge or wherever he was on his jet ski at. I don't pretend to know. But he's on his jet ski with the 2 10-win seasons under his belt since he's gotten to LSU. You say, well, JD, the defense isn't, the defense lacks this, they lack that. Well, the defense also has got Harold Perkins on it. They're going to go shopping in the portal, I promise you, for some more talent. And they got a defensive coordinator last year at Missouri who came to LSU to bring the heat. That defense is going to be a lot better this year, I promise you. But Jaden Daniels, you won the Heisman Trophy. He's not there anymore. You got the gumbo gunslinger, baby, getting that wing loose, getting ready to go throw it all over the yard, Uncle Rico style. Garrett Nussmeier's a dude. I fully believe that. LSU fans that have watched him play, you know that. The knock on him is, well, he likes to throw the ball around the yard too much, likes to be a little bit too aggressive downfield. That's okay. We can coach that. In fact, Joe Sloan coached Jaden Daniels to push the ball downfield a little bit more. I would much rather coach a quarterback to ratchet it down a little bit more. That means he wants to push the ball deep. And then you say, well, Malik Neighbors isn't there. Brian Thomas isn't there. Shout out the Ponderosa, the message board on our LSU On 3 site, the Bengal Tiger. Malik Neighbors, first-round pick, so we're on the same page. Those guys aren't there anymore. That's going to change the offense too, right? Yeah, I suppose it could. C.J. Daniels, though, from Liberty, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. You got through the portal. Kyron Lacey, I expect him to do massive numbers like Goodwill Hunting this year, getting more targets for that big body. Nussmeier has shown in multiple spots his growth. I think the bowl game was a tremendous example of that. 400 yards, give or take, in that game. Okay, 395. We'll be generous, give him 400 there. And Brian Kelly also, his year 3 effect cannot be overlooked. Brian Kelly, when he gets a third year, typically, I say when he gets a third year, Brian Kelly in his third year is what I'm trying to say here, usually does very, very good things. Like at Cincinnati, his third year there, made the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame, his third year there, made the national championship game. So bet against LSU if you want to. Talk about other teams if you want to. We do it on this show as well, but LSU deserves a lot more buzz than they're getting right now, if you ask us. Now, Michigan, it's funny. Michigan, they won the national title last year. They hoisted that trophy, had the confetti drop on them in Houston. We were there. We saw it. It was massive for that program. It was massive for that brand, massive for that fan base. And then you fast forward the clock a few months, new quarterback, new head coach, and everyone's talking about Ohio State. Everyone's talking about Oregon. Michigan's just chilling there with the Big Ten championship in Ann Arbor and the national championship in Ann Arbor. I'm like, okay, you don't want to talk about us? That's fine. They are 128th in returning production. It's not great. But the thing that has to be said about Michigan, I think, is they still have guys that, one, played a very real role in a depth capacity last year. So just because they weren't racking up all the stats doesn't mean they aren't still really good players. The other part of this, they are still guys on that roster that are part of the development monster and the process that's in-house in Ann Arbor. So just because you don't know the names just yet, just because we haven't seen them on that all Big Ten team just yet, doesn't mean they're not going to end up there. Okay? Michigan typically taking the high 3-star guy, the low 4-star guy, and been able to have some pretty good success with those kind of players and beyond that. They also still have some staples within that team that are back. We talk about him a lot on this show, but I'll do it one more time. Colston Loveland, he may very well be the best tight end in America when we open up the season. Donovan Edwards, you saw him be a 1-2 punch with Blake Corum. Kind of took more of a backseat approach last year in that running back room. He'll be the bell cow this year. Who's playing quarterback? Great question, but you got a lot of defense and guys on that defense that are back, from Kenneth Grant to Will Johnson. Like, you know these names. Those guys are still there. That culture is still there. Michigan, keep an eye on the Wolverines. I'm excited to watch what they do. Now, A&M. A&M is a team. It's ironic, really, that A&M's not getting a ton of buzz right now in the offseason. And, again, some of it has to do with the SEC and all those headlines we already talked about. I truly think with Texas A&M, there is some sort of fatigue going on with talking about them from the spring through the summer into the fall. And when I say there's some fatigue, how many times did you hear somebody sit up here at a desk behind a microphone like this with a national logo in front of them and say, A&M's the college football playoff team. A&M's going to win the SEC. A&M's going to insert some sort of lofty accolade there. Well, they've been burned a couple of times doing that. The first time, or I guess 2 years ago, to the 5-7, and that was a mission failed by all parties involved. And then you went 7-5 this past year. It is what it is. So I think some folks are maybe feeling like they got burned by touching that stove. That was A&M. And now they're trying to backtrack and figure out a way to assess them appropriately. I'll tell you what, we right here on this show, not to pat ourselves on the back, we didn't necessarily drink that Kool-Aid around A&M and them being a college football playoff team. But the thing with A&M, the problem was never the engine that was the roster talent within College Station. They always had dudes. And that was the reason why they got the accolades preseason that folks gave them, because they had a lot of guys with a lot of stars next to their name. But the thing with them that wasn't going right was, from where I'm standing, they did not have the proper culture or standards, or however you want to dissect it. There was not the right internal processes in place, schematic or otherwise, to capitalize on that roster talent. Well, the teacher, the internal structure, the staff, that's no longer there in College Station. And that's not to dunk on Jimbo Fisher. I'm just saying, if the Jimmies and Joes were of a certain caliber and the results did not reflect the Jimmies and Joes caliber, who do you point the finger at? The processes and the staff and those putting those Jimmies and Joes in place. So now you bring in Mike Elko, who did more with less at Duke, and he brings in a structure that I think could honestly change the entire outlook for A&M in 2024. I'm just saying, however quickly they take to his new structure is how successful they're going to be. They went 7-5 last year with a quarterback that was, or I'll rephrase that. They went 7-5 last year with a quarterback that was not their starter, seemingly structural issues within their program. What can they do when they correct those? What can they do with the starting quarterback and better structure? I'm excited to see it. But A&M, I understand the fatigue around them, but I would not be surprised if they were a major disruptor in 2024. We'll say that again. Last thing we want to get to here, Penn State. Remember, Penn State was kind of that trendy team last year. A lot of folks picked them to be a college football playoff team. A lot of folks picked them to win the Big Ten. I think actually halfway through the season, we had them pegged as a college football playoff team. So hand up, that's on us too. There's a lot of reason for excitement from last year for them, and we get that. But those same reasons, I think, are still in place. Like, the reason why you were so fired up about Penn State last year, us included, was because you had Drew Aller playing quarterback, who's got a throwing arm touched by God, right? I mean, he can do some things physically that you haven't had a quarterback in Happy Valley that's consistently able to do those things. He's still there. That running back room, one of the best in the country in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, that's still there. The defense, you lost some pieces to the NFL. No way around that. Abdul Carter, that absolute freak show, that nightmare that wears number 11 for opposing offenses, he's still there. So I understand that there was a lot of missed expectations last year with still losing to Michigan and still losing to Ohio State, but I don't think they're nearly as far off as a lot of folks want to pretend. To me, they're literally missing one ingredient, and that was the vertical pass game. They're one of the worst teams in the country when it comes to the yards per pass. Julian Fleming transfers in from Ohio State to Penn State. If they can just be more explosive vertically, Drew Aller's going to be more comfortable as a quarterback this year, I think, with having another season now under his belt playing college football. There's no Michigan on the schedule. There's no Oregon on the schedule. There's no Iowa on the schedule. And you get Ohio State at home. So I understand a lot of buzz around other teams, and deservedly so, but Penn State now, kind of that middle child of the Big Ten, I would be slow to disrespect the Nittany Lions. So LSU, Michigan, A&M, and Penn State, I believe, just need a little R-E-S-P-E-C-T, okay? A little R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Peach-me-tea. Find out what it means to me, for those of you that watch The Office. All right, let's keep on moving here. Again, make sure you're subscribed. If you're not following me on the social channels, at JD Piquel, Twitter, Instagram, those are the places where you're going to get as much access as we can give you to our little hard count field trips. I've sort of become fond of calling them. Went to Auburn, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, going to Tennessee as we're on the air right now, probably watching practice. If you want to have a small peek into those travels, follow me there. We'll post some stuff on the story. We'll tweet some stuff out. It'll be a good time. We also have somewhere we're going on Wednesday, so a good place to know where we're going. So we went to Auburn, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, and Auburn had their A-Day, which is their spring game, this past weekend. And we saw Cam Coleman do Cam Coleman things, so that was pretty encouraging if you're an Auburn fan. But I think that I'm ready to say some definitive things about Auburn. Now, the portal's still going to do what the portal does, I'm sure, and I would expect Auburn to probably add some guys, and I have no idea if they'll lose some guys, but just by nature of the law of nature in college football, nobody is immune to that. Auburn's over-under win total is at 7.5. I got a strong feeling on this one. We'll talk about it right now. Make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. We appreciate you so much for that. College football every single day. College football the way that you want it covered every single day. All right, we're not hot takers. We're not headline makers. Like, we just love this game so much, the way that you love this game. And so we're going to talk about it in that fashion. Thank you for being locked in. Thank you for being subscribed. So I think Auburn, when it comes to that win total, I think they're going to blow that out of the water. Now, what does that look like? Is it 9 wins? Is it a smooth 8 wins? Like, I don't know, but I feel really confident on putting an over down on Auburn for that 7.5 win total. A big reason why, when you look at this roster, man, like, I understand Peyton Thorne doesn't provide the most confidence if you're looking strictly at what he did last year. A lot of moments where you're like, golly, can we throw a forward pass? I get that. I feel you on that. We'll talk about that. But the roster in itself is a lot of dudes that can play right now in the SEC. Like, I don't think Auburn has this massive roster talent deficiency. Do they have the best roster in the SEC? I think we'd all be kidding ourselves a little bit if we went so far to say that. But I think Auburn, by nature of the games they were in last year, I know they were at home against Georgia. I know they were at home against Alabama. You cannot ignore the fact that they were down to the final drive against Georgia, the final play against Alabama, and those are two of the best teams in the country. Georgia, I think, probably should have made the college football playoff. Alabama did make the college football playoff. So if that's the measuring stick and you're Auburn, what can you do this year in your second year under Hugh Freeze? And again, the roster talent itself, I think, by what they showed last year and who they have coming back and who they added through the portal, there should be a lot of excitement around the things that they can do. Like, they don't have to wait. They don't have to wait around, is what I've said before about Auburn. They can be in position right now to be some takers in that conference. So another reason why I like that over-under win total, the over on the over-under win total, rather, for that 7.5 win mark. Now, again, Peyton Thorne is going to be the reason why a lot of folks say, too sweet for me, too rich for me. I hear you. I understand. I'm not even saying you're wrong for having reservations. But the thing with Peyton Thorne is the context around him in 2024 is massively more favorable than it was in 2023. The first is you add in a guy like Cam Coleman. And if you flipped on the highlights of that spring football game, you saw number 8 flash in a very big way. He should be in high school right now. He enrolled early. He had 4 catches for 92 yards. Big-time touchdown in the A-Day from Peyton Thorne, by the way. And that's not just a one-off thing where it's like, oh, who's this Cam Coleman guy? Like, the buzz throughout spring practice was, this dude's going to play. This dude probably going to start. This guy, different than anybody else we have on the roster. And so, as a quarterback, the way that Auburn struggled last year, yes, you point the finger at Peyton Thorne, but I think we'd also be kidding ourselves, be a little bit ridiculous if we didn't take into account the guys that he's throwing the football to. They didn't have anybody like Cam Coleman on that roster last year. That's not me throwing shade. We're just stating facts here. He is a game changer. That's me saying that, and that's Hugh Freeze saying that, which he said as much after the A-Day in their press conference. The other part of this with Peyton Thorne, I think the offense they're running under Hugh Freeze has more direction than they've ever had since he's gotten there. And we saw this in flashes last year. There was a reason why Auburn was successful moving the ball against Georgia. Apparently, Hugh Freeze kind of said, hey, pass that controller this way. I'm gonna pick a few plays here. I'm going to kind of go first-person shooter right now, all right? And there was a reason they were that successful. Like, there was a very obvious change in tempo, change in direction, change in result. And so now having a full season with him running the show, I think that's also going to pay dividends. And when I talk about direction, like, I think there's a very clear identity that I didn't really see as much from Auburn last year when Hugh Freeze wasn't running things. And it is rather this year, directionally, we're going to run the football. We're going to keep you off balance. We're going to mess with the second level of your defense. Those linebackers, they're not going to know if it's Peyton Thorne on the read option. They're not going to know if it's a speed sweep around the edge. We're going to attack the perimeter, and we're going to make you have to honor our run game. When we do that now, we've got that pass option where we can hit you over the top. And Cam Coleman, his ability to win 50-50 balls, That's going to be a big difference maker in what they didn't have last year offensively and what they will have this year. So the thing that I think sticks out with Peyton Thorne, man, yes, he's got more weapons. Yes, he's got, I think, a little bit more help schematically. But the way that he was stepping into his throws in that spring game, maybe I'm taking too much from it. But I think the way that he is confidently delivering the football and knowing where he's going with it, there's no double clutching it. There's no guessing where he's going with the football. Like, he is very much so, I'm throwing the ball here. And that sounds like a simple thing. I promise you, for Peyton Thorne in this offense to have that kind of confidence, that can make all the difference in the world. Your quarterback feeling more confident in the system can make all the difference in the world. And I think that's a very big byproduct of him now getting 15 spring practices, which he did not get last year before being thrown into the deep end. That was the SEC. So I think Peyton Thorne will have a massively different output than he did in 2024 or 2023. And I think you'll see different results in a large part in 2024. And so that's a big reason why I'm high on the over there for Auburn. Now, the thing with Auburn, too, better roster, or a roster talent that's better than people want to give credit to. If Peyton Thorne's a question mark, I think he passes that test for you with flying colors. And, well, flying colors is generous. I think he passes that test for you enough to have the over on that 7.5 win total. But the internal culture for Auburn is what I really want us to focus on here, because it's tough to quantify, right? Like, you can't put a rushing yards next to how bought in your team is, and you can't put a number of points allowed per game next to who's doing the right things behind closed doors. But I think there's something to be said for a culture going from year one to year two, and buy-in going from, hey, we will be, we will be present, we'll attend, to we're bought in. There's a difference from going to we want to eat to we're willing to go out and hunt for what we want to eat. And I think that's where Auburn is shifting right now. We talked to Hugh Freeze about this when we went out and visited him during spring practice. He said this is now a more player-led operation. He said he went to them, asked them for their input, and then took their input to the team and said, if anybody disagrees with this, speak now. If you don't like how we're about to go about our business, say your piece right now. And he said he's thrilled with the results to this point, and I believe it. I believe it. Like, the growing pains in a lot of ways from last year, the New Mexico State game, the being so close against teams like Georgia, I think the flashes are encouraging, but growing pains are just that. They're painful. Like, we say it a lot on this show. Whenever you start to do things the right way, you don't feel good at first. When you've been eating junk food for the better part of the last few months and you start eating right, eating clean foods, your body has this response where it's like, what is going on? I feel sick. I don't feel right. It takes some time before you see the results. You start hitting the gym. You go to the gym for the first 2 days, you're like, I think I broke something. I think my body is literally about to shut down. You keep on going, you keep pressing through, and you get to where you want to be at physically. That's what Auburn's doing right now, and I think the way they've used the portal and the way they're going to be better offensively is kind of fast-tracking that. So the over-under win total, again, it's 7.5. I think they'll be a team that's pushing for 9 wins, if we're just going to be honest right now. We're sitting here in April, so we reserve our right to, sort of tinker with that win total. But, I mean, we're going to sit down and do our schedule predictions here via our social media platform on TikTok, and we will not have Auburn under 7 wins. I promise you that right now. So let me know in the comment section what you think about it. I can already hear y'all with very strong opinions, so we appreciate you for that. Appreciate you bringing the juice, but let me know how you feel about Auburn and that over-under win total. We will take the over as we sit here in April. Now, I think Auburn's a team that, for good reason, there's some question marks around them. There's some question marks around what they're going to be long-term. There's some question marks around Peyton Thorne, but y'all, I'm going to be real right now. I, for the better part of this spring, have been questioning what Florida State's going to be. What are they going to be? Because last year was magical for them in a lot of ways up until it wasn't on Selection Sunday. But if you told a Florida State fan before last year started, hey, you're going to go undefeated, you're going to win the ACC, you're going to make a New Year's Six bowl game, will you take that? Now, obviously, you're leaving out the parts that, hey, the entire fan base feels like they had their birthright taken. That was the college football playoff berth by winning all their games. And Jordan Travis had a horrific injury. So those are parts you leave out. But I think in large part, you give them that 2023 script of being undefeated and winning the conference, I say, yeah, I'm all in. So that part was awesome, right? However, I look at this year, and from a 30,000-foot view, you're like, all right, well, a lot of those dudes that made last year happen, a lot of those leaders that made last year happen, they're not there anymore. Jordan Travis, he's gone. Jared Verse, he's gone. Braden Fisk, Keon Coleman, like a lot of key players to this thing that helped establish the culture and the physicality up front that I just mentioned, they're gone. Florida State, 83rd in returning production. And so I kind of had this dialogue where I'm like, Mike Norvell is one of the best coaches in college football. I fully believe that. But how do you replace all that production? How do you replace that culture? And where does that leave Florida State moving into 2024? And Florida State obviously has done what they do in the portal. Mike Norvell just walks in there, kicks the door down, and says, I want you, you, and you. You see what we've done with transfers? You want to come play for us? You do? Okay, let's get it rolling. And the question has always been, well, Florida State, they use the portal well. Is that sustainable? And the way that I think about that, the answer that I got to that question rather internally was, you can't rely on something until you can. You can't live off of the three-point shot until you're pretty much lethal from beyond the arc. You can't live off of the deep pass and be a pass-happy offense, again, theoretically, until that's the way that you're able to make defenses pay. Johnny Manziel was an ad-lib kind of quarterback. It'll never work in college. It's not going to work consistently. Did against Alabama, it's not going to work the next week. Not going to work the next week until eventually he showed us as a college quarterback. That was who he was. He had a lot of success with it. So for Florida State, can't live off the transfer portal, right, until you can. Until you do have multiple sample sizes of guys coming to Florida State, having potential, or having a solid track record from their previous stop at a lower level of ball at Jared Verse, at Braden Fisk, and then they go out and ball out Florida State. So it's not reliable. You can't rely on it until you can. I think Florida State has proven now you lose key pieces year in and year out. That's the nature of college football. But you can rely on the portal with Mike Norvell running the show to be successful and to be honestly pretty accurate when it comes to your evals and pretty phenomenal when it comes to your ability to bring those guys to Tallahassee and have the success that they're having right now. So, yes, a lot of that is eval. Yes, a lot of that is having the resources to bring those guys there. I think even further, if we want to talk about what it means on a Saturday afternoon perspective, it means that Florida State is great at adapting to their talent. Like, guys come to Florida State, like I just said, with a strong background and some, pretty solid skins on the wall. But more often than not, it has paled in comparison to what they do when they get to Florida State. Jared Verse was at Albany. I love Albany. I never watched an Albany football game in my life. Braden Fisk was doing his thing on Maction. Both of those guys are set to make a lot of money in the NFL because of what they did at Florida State. Keon Coleman, he was great at Michigan State. Don't get it twisted. I think a lot of folks have a very real understanding as to how good he's going to be in the NFL because of what he did at Florida State. Johnny Wilson, playing in the Pac-12, I think he did a lot for himself by going to Florida State and playing in that offense, doing the things he did there. So, again, what I want to make sure we say here is when you talk about the future at Florida State, yes, it's going to be transfer portal driven in 2024. Like, just the reality. There's a lot of guys that you're going to ask to step up in a big way. Malik Benson from Alabama, DJU most notably from Oregon State and Clemson. But with DJU, and this is where I want to really spend some time, a lot of folks are second-guessing Florida State because DJ Uiagalelei is going to be their quarterback, right? Hey, DJU didn't have his best showing at Clemson based on what he was as a recruit and what he was supposed to do there, taking over after Trevor Lawrence. Hey, Oregon State, looks solid, but it's a different ballgame than the ACC is. Can he actually deliver in the ACC? If I told you DJ Uiagalelei is going to have his best season of his college career, what would you think is true about Florida State? And then the question I would have after that is, why can't DJU have his best season? In fact, on paper, I think everything is set up to point to he should have his best season. One, he's playing another year of college football. That makes 27 years of college football for DJU. God bless him. He's got more playmakers around him than he's ever had. No shade on either school he's played at, just kind of the fact of the matter. Also, he's got the best play caller he's ever had. He should have his best season. He should be successful in this system. Mike Norvell, with what he's done with transfer portal players, much less quarterbacks, he should be successful in this system, and Florida State should score a lot of points in that respect. And so the other question that people are going to ask here is, well, how do you recreate that culture they had? How do you keep that temperature that they've had the last couple of years that allowed them to be LSU by blocking the extra point and propel them to an undefeated season even when their starting quarterback goes down? There's this buzz now that this is the best team from a talent level that Mike Norvell's had. Is that true? We're going to find out. But I think the danger with having success and having new faces enter into that fold is that they feel like they are just entitled to winning. Like, the danger of success is entitlement and complacency. Now, however, even though they have some talent on this roster that we're going to talk about here right now, a lot of these dudes have chips on their shoulders and have potential they haven't just yet reached. Fentrell Cypress, a great example. Transferred in from Virginia. Good year last year. I think he expects to have a great year this year. Talk about Marvin Jones Jr. transferring over from Georgia. He was a 5-star out of high school. He didn't have the career he wanted to have at Georgia. He's looking for something to prove in 2024. DJU is the perfect example of someone who has every right to have a chip on their shoulder and wants to prove other people wrong about how they've talked about his college career. I think the hunger paired with the talent, paired with the way that Mike Norvell does things and what he preaches that his players have taken to over the years, it's a really, really strong combo. Malik Benson, another guy to add to that list. He came in as one of the top, if not the top, junior college player in America to Alabama. Was expected to be wide receiver 1 for a lot of folks in Tuscaloosa. Didn't happen that way. Didn't work out for whatever reason. He's got something to prove. So the something to prove individually for a lot of these players, I think is going to mold and mesh really well to how they do it at Florida State. And I think that combo, again, I think that's scary for college football. I really do. Because even though there's some unproven pieces, the continual response out of Tallahassee is, hey, this is the most talented roster that Mike Norvell has had. Patrick Payton, Darrell Jackson, the transfer from Miami, is going to be eligible this year. Praise the Lord for common sense. Or I guess the lack of common sense last year was troubling, but praise the Lord he's playing this year. I'm excited about Florida State. Who are they is a great question. I don't expect a drop-off. I really don't. A lot of question marks in the ACC. Florida State, their fair share of question marks, but by how Mike Norvell does things, how they utilize the portal, trusting the track record, Florida State, I expect to be a force yet again in 2024. Yeah, so let me know what y'all think about Florida State, man. I'm excited to watch them this year. The ACC in general is going to be just box office. I mean, you got Miami with a new quarterback, NC State with a new quarterback, Clemson with a lot to prove for a lot of folks, Louisville with like 27 new players or something crazy like that. Like, it's going to be a fun conference. Oh, by the way, Virginia Tech with the #1 returning production in the country. I'm a big Kyron Jones stan. I'll just be real with y'all. They finished the year 5-2 their last 7. Like, you hear what I'm saying. The ACC should be good TV this year. Speaking of good TV, man, we got a lot of y'all that tune into this show that love defensive football. And I'm not talking about emotionally getting defensive. I'm talking about you turn on the TV on a Saturday, you see a strip sack, you see forced fumbles, you see knocking someone's block off over the middle, you see goal line stands, and we love that, and you love that. We love all college football, but for all the folks that are fans of the linebackers wearing neck rolls, this segment's for you. Who are the most dangerous defenses in college football? We already did a segment on the offenses previously. We tried to do the segment for y'all live on Thursday. Technology said no. So we're going to keep on pushing on. We control our attitude. We control our effort. And our effort right now is about to bring y'all the best defenses in college football, starting with Nebraska. Now, Nebraska can be very quick to push back and say, well, they haven't made a bowl game since Nam. I hear what you're saying. I think that'll change this year. But the lack of success in the win-loss column does not take away from what they did defensively last year. Allowed 18 points a game. They bring back 78% of that production, running the 3-3-5 defense, which is built, quite frankly, for modern college football. Tony White is back running the show. He's going to be a head coach, I believe, this time next year. Just calling my shot. Nebraska, one of the most dangerous defenses in the country. Book it. Stand in the Big Ten. Golly. Getting choked up about it. Just the defense, man. It gets me fired up. Staying in the Big Ten. Ohio State brings back everyone and their mama And they bring over Caleb Downs, who's the number one player. Not the best safety, not the best defensive player, the best player from the transfer portal. Freshman All-American from Alabama. They're going to be nasty. They have another year in the system with Jim Knowles running the show there defensively for them. The reason why that's important, Jim Knowles, man, he's a mad scientist when it comes to running defensive football. Like, the rules within his defense are just counterintuitive. They don't make sense. They take a while to get your feet underneath you. And that's, great once you get comfortable. But the first year for Ohio State, they were conversational in that language. Going into year 3, they're fluent. Like, they're not thinking about the check they have to make. They're not thinking about the drop they have to make. They know it like the back of their hand. And they allowed 11.6 points a game last year. I expect them to improve in 2024. Will we see it in that stat? I don't know, but there's no way around it. Ohio State going to be a problem in the college football. I was going to say Big Ten, but just the college football landscape, they're going to be a problem. So book it. Ohio State, one of the most dangerous defenses without a question. I'll also add that JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are about to eat lunches in 2024. A lot of Big Ten teams on this list, man. Oregon, another year with a lot of the same freak shows up front. Mateo Uiagalelei, second Uiagalelei reference throughout this show. Jordan Birch, who transferred from South Carolina a year ago. He's back for another year. This is a team with 70% of the production back that allowed 17 points a game. And oh, by the way, you got to the portal and added a former rival of yours in lockdown corner Jabbar Muhammad. Now, the reason why that's important is Oregon last year, they were good defensively on the back end, but I think having a lockdown corner where you can just put them on an island, not worry about it, not worry about getting exposed, and let those front seven go and eat and go and hunt and be aggressive and have confidence that your guys on the back end got your back in Jabbar Muhammad, like, that is massive for a defensive coordinator to know that and to be able to call a defense that way. Tosh Lupoi is going to, I believe, even improve on what he did last year. The thing with this, too, this is Dan Lanning's baby. Dan Lanning's a defensive guy. The defensive side of the football is where he's from, from a coaching tree standpoint. Oregon's going to be a force in the Big Ten. The defense is going to be a big part of that. Now, a couple of sneakier ones for you I want to give you here really quick. Oklahoma, their first year in the SEC, they bring 79% of the production from last year back. Say what you want about the offense and Jackson Arnold. I don't think that Oklahoma defensively will have any problem acclimating in the trenches. The other part of this, Brent Venables is slowly but surely acquiring the infinity stones he needs to operate his defense how he wants to. Like PJ Adebawore is going to have another year to cycle up. Danny Stutzman is back. Jaron Kanik is back. Peyton Bowen is back. A lot of pieces in this defense to run the defense how Brent Venables wants to are a part of this defense now, and the talent level is continuing to ascend. I'm excited to watch them this year, man. The personnel with them is crucial. I think that was why you saw them have so many struggles that they did in year 1. You won't see that now in year 3. Now, level of difficulty will improve in the SEC. There's no way around that, but the production they have back, the guys on that roster, the mad scientist that Brent Venables is to run his defense, I mean, he's got the ingredients now. Look out for Oklahoma. Here's a sleeper now. Florida State. Yes, some new faces, no way around it, but I think the guys they have up front, from Marvin Jones Jr., former 5-star at Georgia, we've talked about him. Patrick Payton, who had 7 sacks last year, was an absolute problem for opposing offenses off the edge. You got also Earl Little, the transfer from Alabama, going to play some DB for them. They've been really excited about him. Daryl Jackson, who's I think something crazy, 6'6", 330 pounds, transfer from Miami that sat out last year. What I've heard about him is he just doesn't even look like he's from this planet. Looks like he's carved out of marble, and he's, again, 330 pounds. He's going to be a problem up front. All those pieces for Florida State, I think, should excite the good folks in Tallahassee. Again, they're not going to be one of those teams that get a bunch of headlines early on with, they're going to be the best defense in the country, but I think we'll look up here towards the latter part of the college football season, and I think you'll see that Seminole logo somewhere in that top 15 range for a lot of those key categories. So they lost some guys, no way around it. Braden Fish, Jared Verse, for sure, but the guys they got that are looking to prove themselves in some ways, they're set to ball. So that'll be a lot of fun. So the most dangerous defenses for you: Nebraska, Ohio State, Oregon, Oklahoma, Florida State. Those two kind of sleepers, but regardless, I think those are some of your most dangerous defenses in college football. Not an all-encompassing list, just so we're on the same page here, not an all-encompassing list, but still defenses to know about and to watch closely. They're going to wreak some havoc now. They're going to wreak some havoc, as great defenses tend to do. All right, again, last thing here, make sure you're subscribed. Tons of content for you coming our way. College football, even in the month of April, is still the best sport on the planet. And I understand now you got baseball starting up. Shout out to y'all. I don't know what other sports are going on right now, to be honest with you. That's not me being tongue-in-cheek. I just quite frankly don't know exactly what sports are being played because we do college football and college football only on this show. So with that being said, I got to thinking, man, why is college football so awesome in April? What makes it so elite even in the month of April when we're not actually playing games? I got a couple of reasons, a couple of bullet points I want us to talk about together. Spring games are being played. In no other sport do you get me fired up about practice number 15. And spring games are fun because, yeah, you get to watch the starters play a little bit. You get to see Carson Beck trot out there and throw the ball around the yard. You get to see, X, Y, and Z player that you knew from last year. But you also get to see some new faces, the early enrollee, that new playmaker you got through the transfer portal. Cam Coleman just put on a show at Auburn's A-Day, so you kind of get that juice flowing and get a little peek at to what next year can be. Then also there's the April optimism. Say, JD, what is that? April optimism is something that we have tangentially talked about on this show, and that is like the Kool-Aid you get to drink during the spring, drink it. Like the hype train you get to ride during the spring, get on it and add steam to that hype train because nobody has lost a game during April. Never happened. Okay? So the fact that you get to juice all the propaganda you want up, you get to live off of those little snippets that pop up on your timeline from practice, like buy into that, man. Let that sustain you all the way until media days and until we get to week 0 of the college football season. Optimism is a beautiful thing to waste, or a beautiful thing too beautiful to waste. Depth chart starts to take shape. Kind of start getting some answers when it comes to quarterback battles or other players that are starting to ascend that you maybe heard about a little bit behind closed doors, but then the spring game happens and it's like, oh, that dude is actually running with the ones. He's actually as advertised. The portal is about to get rolling too. So that's kind of hand in hand with the depth chart answers you get. You get quarterback battles that kind of take shape, but you also get to see a lot of individuals that lost their respective position battles at other schools jump in the portal, become available, and you're like, hey, maybe we can dream a little dream and get that guy over to our school. Dallin Hayden, before we got on air today, I believe it was yesterday actually, I guess if you're watching this, the report broke that he's going to jump in the portal when it opens up. It's a big time back from Ohio State. We'll see where he ends up, but the portal is going to be a little bit crazy. How crazy remains to be seen, but another reason to be dialed into college football all year round. High school recruiting also starting to gain some steam here in April. The On Three Recruits channel, best in the business when it comes to keeping you dialed in for all things recruiting. Josh Newberg with bangers on the inside scoop. Phillip Dukes with the 5-star flex. Steve Wiltfong with the Wiltfong whip around. A lot of alliterations there. The bottom line here is recruiting kind of gained some momentum. Quarterback dominoes are falling right now. You had Matt Zollers give his pledge to Missouri, and then people are looking at Julian Lewis, and people are like, is he going to stick with USC? Is he going to flip? I'm not calling my shot there right now. I'm just telling you, recruiting is a year-round deal, but in April, we start to get a little bit of a better picture for where some of these quarterbacks are going because they commit early, and there's just a lot of noise that's made during the month of April when it comes to the recruiting trail. So, all that's to be said, college football is the best sport in the world, and April is no exception to that fact, all right? So, like I said, we're currently at Tennessee. That's why this show is not live. If you're on podcast, don't worry about anything I'm saying. Just make sure you've rated and reviewed, and make sure that you followed on the social channels at JD Pickell on Instagram and on Twitter. We will be live from a campus for you Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. If you want to know what campus that is, make sure you follow me on the social channels, and I will announce it over there. But the bottom line here is, again, we don't take any of this for granted. The fact that we get to go to an SEC school, watch practice, talk to a coach, and then get paid at the end of the week for it is just, it's hysterical. I mean, we would have crawled over broken glass a couple of years ago to even have a chance to do something like that, and to get to do it now for free, or get to do it now for a paycheck. We've done it for free. Get to do it now for a paycheck is nothing short of ridiculous, and we're so glad we get to do it. And we're so glad that we get to do it with y'all. So make sure you're subscribed. I've said that now, I feel like maybe a few too many times, but I just keep on saying that because I want y'all a part of this community. And yeah, man, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. And guess what? We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.